500 years of football expertise and the future of the game. Powered by SūmerSports. Come together. Breaking down the big board with the guys that were in the room. Joining us today on The Evaluation is Mike Mayock, who played safety for the New York Giants, as well as served as the former GM of the Oakland Raiders. We're bringing it all together with the most sophisticated sports technology ever engineered. This is The Evaluation. Coaches. Players win games, but coaches build the world they're played in. They design the schemes, they set the culture, and they carry the blame when everything falls apart. Scouts don't just evaluate talent, they evaluate teachers, leaders, architects. Some coaches develop superstars, others break them. In a league built on inches and egos, the right coach can change a career. The wrong one can ruin it. Every Sunday, someone becomes a genius. Every Monday, someone becomes a scapegoat. Welcome to The Evaluation. I'm your host, Ator Ewan, and today we're talking about the men who make the calls. That's right, we're talking coaches. And I am pleased to be joined by SūmerSports senior analyst and football integration lead, Sam Bruchhaus, and Mike Mayock.
What's up, man?
Mike, you need a title. It didn't feel right.
I was just thinking the same thing, and it made me realize I'm really happy I don't have one. That was long.
That was long. Mike, your experience, obviously, as GM for the Raiders is something that really is wealth of knowledge for us. Let's dive into the traits that make up a great coach that might not show up on a resume.
A great coach is a great teacher, because it doesn't matter what's in your head. It's what you can get across to a group of young men at each position group. I was spoiled because my dad was my high school coach and I played for him for 4 years. As I look back, he was every bit as good a teacher as Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells. There are great teachers / coaches at every level. I was a 10th round draft pick and the Steelers took me in the 10th round. And they had this really young linebacker. I was a safety, but they had this young linebacker coach by the name of Tony Dungy. It took me all of about 2 days to realize this dude was special. I went to him every day in camp, not my D-back coach, I went to him. He had an ability to get calmness, he had a sense about him, an aura of just, we got it, Mike. Right off, players know when a coach can help them get better and when they can help you get to a Super Bowl. And you know it pretty quickly. So if you're a good coach, you better reach those guys right away.
Some of the things that we like to look at, game management decisions, timeouts. Are you utilizing them in situations that are not putting you ahead? You want to look at decision-making on 4th down and short yardage situations. Are you taking advantage of what the data says? And then finally, you can look at stuff like play calling. A little bit of that is the offense coordinator, defense coordinator, but it trickles down from the head coach. Are you running stuff that puts your team in the right position to succeed? Leadership and organization. When you come into a building where there's 53 guys or 90 guys in the offseason, and you expect those guys to perform one task, and that is to work as a team to win games, you have to have a level of organization, leadership, communication that is absolutely unprecedented. When I really think about the analyst stuff that we look at, I really have to focus in on a guy like Mike Tomlin who, maybe might not make the best 4th down decisions by the book all the time, but he's gonna win 8, 9, 10, 11 games. He's gonna make the playoffs. He's gonna get the most out of players that no one else can get out of. And I think as an ex-player and as an analyst as well, it shows up when it comes to his win totals over the spread. That stuff is 80 to 90% of the job, and I don't even think people realize it. I think it's so easy to criticize it from outside, but that is the core understanding of what a coach needs to be.
As former players who have been in buildings, we both understand that there's gotta be a lead dog who's got a plan. All the other coaches, and it permeates through the entire building, that we're all pulling in the same direction. And it's, if I can convince all 53 men that their goal every day, sitting in meetings, practice fields, whatever, is to get a tiny bit better. Towards the end of the year, that's going to be a force multiplier that's going to be difficult for other teams to deal with.
Can you talk a bit about the coach-scout relationship and how that manifests in the pre-draft process?
It sounds like a simple question, but it's really very complicated. And I think there's a lot of dysfunction in the NFL. I spent 20 years at the NFL Network, and my job was to be in all 32 buildings. And I developed relationships with head coaches, general managers, scouts, coaches. And one common denominator as I went around the league every year was the coach were bitching about the scouts, and the scouts were doing the same with the coaches. And I'd hear it all the time, right? And I got in the building with the Raiders, and what I realized is if the head coach and the GM have a mutual respect and for philosophy and where we're going, and it permeates throughout the building, it's a functional building. It's because of the two guys at the top, and at the end of the day, all that matters, it's not whether I want your guy or you want my, what matters is what's best for the building, and it doesn't happen enough.
You look at these scouts and you look at an analyst like myself, we have to choose when we're running our models how long we are looking at these prospects. And it seems like there's a fundamental time difference. Coaches want to win now, right? That's their job. The scouts and the general manager want to look forward into the future. Is there a meeting in the middle there somewhere?
It's a balance, and it's a great question because I'm the son of a coach. I love helping coaches win, but I also understand their mentality. And every coach I've ever met, no matter how forward-thinking they are, no matter how many Super Bowls they've won, really all they focus on is how do we win next Sunday? The general manager's job is the big picture. How do we sustain excellence over time? And really, that's why most of the buildings in the league have a GM-dominated personnel side. So at the end of the day, I am a believer that one side or the other has to have final say in all personnel decisions. Most buildings, not all, most buildings, it's the GM.
As an analyst, I'm always looking at 3 years, right? But a scout has to be looking for the second contract, 8 years down the line. Meanwhile, a coach is only really looking at one. So those timelines, I think, are really key, and that's what may create some of that aggression inside the building when you have those different timelines. But if people can bring it together, I think it's a great relationship.
And how early are coaches involved in the scouting process? Obviously, if you're in season, if you're making a playoff run, right into the pre-draft process, when do coaches start getting involved?
There's 32 teams in 32 different schools of thought, okay? And it depends on what the role of the coaches are going to be throughout the whole process. Most teams throughout the league have varying degrees. I think it's only fair to the coaches to give them an opportunity to sit down like this at the combine and look a kid in the eye. You only get about 20 minutes. It's hard. Here's where the coaches get upset. It's like they want me to spend all this time watching tape, and then all I get is the GM calls me in front of all of his scouts and asks me to read my top 10 and why I like them. And then I don't have any idea whether my input matters or not, because that's it. The scouts are like, wait a minute, 11 and a half months of the year, I'm getting ready for the draft. And then these coaches parachute in when all of a sudden it's their decision about who we're going to take. So there's some of the primary headbutting that goes on in the building. And one thing I did with the Raiders that I liked is I'd take my tight end scout and I'd go to Coach Gruden and say, can we get your tight end coach? And the two of them were going to sit down and we're going to look at those 20 guys. And the two of you aren't leaving a room until you come to an agreement on what the order is. And I thought just kind of pushing them together and telling them you're going in the room, you're closing the door, had a lot of benefits to us.
It's interesting too, I think certain GMs seem to fall in love with certain schools and just the makeup of that school and knowing what kind of a guy you're gonna get coming out of that program.
There are certain programs where you go in there and the access is amazing. And most importantly, you got contacts in the building that you trust. You know what you're getting from Nick Saban in his program. You know what you're getting from Kirby Smart in his program.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because in the data, those programs typically rise to the top, right? You got an Indiana program now that is extremely well coached. I think we're going to see a lot of those guys go in the first and second round. And so maybe they're added to this group. But typically when it comes down to it, recruiting rankings, and also I think now we have to think about transfer portal rankings, are typically something that does stick to the next level. So you think about a team like the Bengals, for example, who have seen very draft success, as everyone does, but who's the two top names of their board? Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, both highly rated recruits in the case of Jamar Chase, a highly rated transfer recruit in the case of Joe Burrow, put on at LSU, an excellent program, and that gets a little sticky. So I think when people do find those programs that they like, where you know that they're gonna recruit well, you know that they're gonna develop well, and you know that they're gonna end up being productive at the college level, it can really make a big difference.
Coaching matters. You just brought up Indiana. So what I love is that the players that just won a national championship in Indiana, he brought 13 of them with him from JMU. JMU. Like, who made the mistake on these kids coming out? of high school. Sarratt, wide receiver, he's probably going on day 2. D'Angelo Pons, the corner, he's probably going on day 2. Aiden Fisher, the linebacker, is a day 3 guy, but he's going to probably start in the NFL. Not to mention the quarterback, who might be the first pick in the whole draft from Cal, who you can't just say 5-star recruits are the guys that we're going to hang our hats on, because these guys were 2 and 3 stars coming out. And now you just made the statement that a lot of these Indiana guys are going to go high, and they are. And a big part of that is the coaches at Indiana and their development of these players. I always admired a couple teams because of their consistency, Baltimore and Pittsburgh. One of the reasons they were so consistent as in drafting and free agency, 25 years, there's 2 coaches and 2 GMs. And then you look over at Pittsburgh, Kevin Colbert was outstanding as a GM. Their head coaches were Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin. The GMs knew what a Baltimore Raven and a Pittsburgh Steeler look like and smell like. The scheme changed, but the guys that walked in that door from a cultural fit, why isn't the rest of the league kind of replicating what they're doing? And it starts with ownership, and it starts with being a lot more intentional with the people you keep and the people you fire.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sam. Our first guest was the quarterback's coach for the Packers and was the head coach for the 49ers and the Detroit Lions. He then went on to become an analyst for the NFL Network. He is Steve Mariucci, and he sat down with our very own Mike Mayock.
It's time to welcome in one of my favorite people that I've ever met. Steve Mariucci, how are you, pal?
How you doing, Mike?
When you look back on your coaching days, do you remember the wins and losses or the people?
You know, Mike, I remember what I had for lunch yesterday. but I remember plays from junior varsity football, hook and divide right against West Iron County to Mark Noski for a touchdown. You remember plays, you remember people, you remember locker rooms. I remember a lot of it, but the losses are more devastating. You know that.
Yes. There's been a lot of talk lately. Can the same person be a great coordinator, offensive or defensive, but then struggle to be a head coach?
Let's say you have a great DE coach or a great position coach at any position, right? And you elevate him. I've seen where, because his role has changed, his effectiveness in some ways have changed because you replaced him, and now all of a sudden he's having to be a head coach and dealing with defense, overseeing management. When I was just the offensive coordinator calling plays, I was better. I just did that versus when I was the head coach of the Niners or the Lions trying to call plays too. I would lose my focus on the job at hand. Some guys are better suited to do that than others.
And I look around the league right now, when I see John Harbaugh get let go, when I see Sean McDermott get let go, you and I are old timers. Do you just kind of shake your head and say, what are we doing?
Head coach or GM in the National Football League is really unique, okay? It's okay to be a good school teacher, a good lawyer, or a good doctor. But being just good in the National Football League with many organizations, that's not enough. The bar is set so high. If you don't get to that Super Bowl and win the damn thing, you got to be the best or close to the best, and you got to be there quite often. And that's so unique in terms of a profession. Talk about pressure.
We're talking a lot about scouts and coaches and how you integrate the two in a building. And I think there's a lot of dysfunction around the league. How would you best maximize that relationship within an NFL building so you make sure the scouts and the coaches are working in harmony?
Communication is key in most everything. And when there's a new staff, there's new philosophies, there's new systems. And the communication between the new coaches and their systems to be related to the information to the scouts, because this is what we need. Yeah, evaluate everybody, but this is the kind of defense we're going to play. There's certain types of players coaches want to have in their scheme, and scouts have to know that. They have to be able to evaluate and shop around to find those players for those coaches.
You're awesome. I miss you.
I love you. Let's do it some other time, okay?
You got it. Thanks, brother.
Sam, word on the street is you have a deep dive on the coach-scout relationship.
If you really break down the numbers, it comes down to like a first-round quarterback is expected to get the same second contract that Justin Fields got. A first-round wide receiver, Mike, is really only expected to hit 800 yards once in his career. It's an extremely difficult thing to do, and when you have a general manager and a staff who is doing it 12 months of the year, it puts a lot of pressure for them to get it right in a system that has very little predictability. And so I think one of the main items between the coaches and the scouts is managing those expectations, setting your coaches up to succeed when it comes to developing those guys, and having a good back and forth relationship and understanding base rates.
One of the things I'm curious about is how coaching has evolved. Mike, you've obviously been around the game a long time. How much have you seen the approach to coaching change over the years?
Because of the limitations in the offseason, and especially during the season, once you get to training camp, there's a limited number of padded practices, both in training camp and the regular season, which severely limits contact other than on game day. So how do you teach aggressiveness such as blocking and tackling without that? Now what a lot of the coaches are doing is different tackling drills. And you've seen it, some of them, they're rolling tires, some of them have mechanical machines you're tackling. You know, everybody's kind of doing it their own way. I've watched a couple of older coaches coach tackling with angle tackling, which takes away a lot of the potential for injury. So at the end of the day, I think there's a marriage of old school blocking, tackling, schematics with kind of new school evolution of how do we deal with the lack of time to prepare.
I think that's a great highlight too, because you add in the data, and we've been able to better collect the understanding of the load that a player has on them and what that means at the next level. Using analytics to understand the impact on players, whether that's on the game, when you're looking at the motion rates and the play action rates and stuff like that, or also looking at the sheer physicality of the game is very key. Curt Cignetti at Indiana is a Saban acolyte. He has an hour and a quarter practices. And he says, we got to keep these guys healthy. Availability is the best ability.
And you know, Sam, I think you touched on something, but I don't think the people at home really understand when you talk about managing load. And in the NFL and colleges now, I mean, with all the GPS and the data that the players wear in practice, I found it fascinating. We can measure Hunter Renfrow at 180 pounds, a wideout, you know, versus a 205 pound, and it's completely individualized. We're not saying it's the same thing for both of you. It's a program that's different, and we got to marry the weight room with the practice field and everything else to try and manage the load and minimize injuries. It really is a marriage of analytics and football.
Sam, you got another deep dive for us?
The key element of this is what we call expected points. And what expected points is it takes the context of the game and tries to put yardage in context. So a lot of the times when people are making these fourth down decisions, these innovative coaches are going for it. A lot of people say, well, they don't understand the situation. There's a lot baked into these situations. There's down, there's distance, a lot of the times there's weather, there's time left on the clock. And so when you build all that in, it allows us to look at two things. Number one, how many points are we actually expected to add on this play by going for it? Secondarily, it tells you how much win probability, what is the probability that we win on this play if we go for it? That's why you see some of these scenarios such as deep late in a game, weird field position, you're on the one going in trying to score. Well, you might want to go for that because you'll pin that team back. You actually have a better probability to score on the back end than you do on the front end. That's what's going into a lot of these discussions, E, and I think that is why some of these analytics that we've talked about are going to help so much in the future.
We've talked about some very heady things and seeing the forest for the trees, but it's also a very personal game. And Mike, you have a lot of personal stories. I'm wondering, what moment during your time as a GM or a scout, what are you most proud of?
Leading up to the 21 draft, we're about 2 weeks out. Illinois had a pro day, and I sent one of our cross-checkers to the pro day, Nolan Naraki, and we meet with our area scout. They call me, say, I think we're a little low on this corner, Nate Hobbs. Nolan said, Mike, can you put your eyes on him? In one day, it went from the pro day at Illinois to the GM going to the defensive backs coach, to getting him the next day on a Zoom call. Now my job is to figure out where he might go. Right? So here it is, coaches and scouts like, Milo, this is where we're going to get this kid. Let's pray he's there. We're sweating it out. Boom, we get him. This is a 5th round guy, and we're sweating it out, and we spent hours and hours trying to get it right with the coaches and scouts. And I was really proud of the fact that we did the right work. We got everybody involved that should have been involved. We got the kid at the right time in the draft that we wanted to get him. He ended up being on the all-rookie that year, that team. He ended up being everything we thought he could be, and I thought the process worked the right way.
Football, in many ways, it's about more than just football. Was there a moment where you realized your time in the game was bigger than just the game itself?
It's cliche. Football's or a team sport is a metaphor for life, and all. I believe it. All the good things that you get out of it. Team sports are bigger than you are. You learn so many good things, but then, we draft Maxx Crosby. We knew he might have a sobriety issue. After his rookie year, where he came in second for the Defensive Rookie of the Year behind Nick Bosa, I get a phone call from his agent. They're going to get him into a facility to help him. Okay, it kind of got to the point where even he said, I need help. He hung in. He went through the entire program. He came back the next year. He's an addictive personality. So what has he done? He's channeled that addiction away from the drugs and alcohol to being a great husband, a great father, and of course, a great football player. And it's really cool, and I'm very proud of it.
When I was a senior, Category 5 hurricane hit my hometown of Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about what I could do, how I could help my hometown, and one of my teammates said, hey, dude, people are hungry. A couple days go past, and then all of a sudden I go look at my locker, and my locker is filled with canned goods, food, all this stuff to bring to the local
From
food
your
bank.
teammates?
From my teammates.
Awesome.
And that's the name of the game. It's not just we're going to go score 7 points down the field. It's we're going to make an impact on a community. We're going to make an impact on a community that people may not even know who we are. But it's about being together and achieving more, and that's what the core of football is.
I really love that. It really is about people. The Maxx story, helping open a door for him, helping him live a dream. But the flip side of that is having to deal with cutting players. As a general manager, how do you deal with that?
That was so hard. So hard. And I probably got cut 3 or 4 times. So when a player came in and I had to cut him, I wanted him to hear from the general manager face to face. I wasn't going to push it off on anybody else. And B, I wanted to give a fair overview of what it really was and why. Okay? And sometimes you had to look a kid in the eye and say, we didn't think you were good enough. And I don't want to end a kid's dream, but I do want to be honest with him. He might walk out of the office and say, effing Mayock has no idea what he's talking about. I'm good enough, and probably go try to prove me wrong, and that's fine. But I think the emotional piece of it, my first year with the Raiders, we had Hard Knocks, which was really hard for a rookie GM to deal with. And they wanted to put a camera in my office on Final Cut Day, and I wouldn't let them, and they were very upset, and I understand why. But on the other hand, the embarrassment that some players may feel when being cut. When I was a player and I got cut, it was the first time in my life somebody told me I wasn't good enough athletically, right? It's an incredibly private moment between two people. Most importantly, I wanted the guys to feel that I respected what they did and would try to help them going forward.
These are coworkers and brothers and sisters and folks that are legitimately putting themselves out there on television every single day. I can understand why it's so difficult for you.
Gentlemen, we've had so much great insight, but if you could isolate one single thing to tell either fans or to tell players, younger players, what would that be?
Our game is so big now, and fantasy football has pushed it. And what I'd like the fans to know is that while they're being so critical, and they have a right to be critical and voice an opinion, but understand there's people and families behind it. Some of my best coaching buddies and scouting buddies have moved 10 times in 12 or 13 years. Art Rooney, the old Art Rooney, the patriarch of the Steelers, told me when I was a rookie for the Steelers, walking off a practice field and it's muddy and dirty and I'm beat to crap. It's 95 degrees. I'm making $33,000 that year. And he looked at me, he said, son, it's a hard way to make an easy living. And I never forgot that, and I think it's more true today than ever.
It is an easy living. It's something that everyone cares about. When everyone cares about it, that doesn't mean all the opinions are correct. And so the advice I would give is understand which voices matter and listen to those voices. Players, young scouts, young coaches, if you can lock in and identify which voices matter and follow those, it'll end up going the right direction.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mike. This man is not only an NFL veteran as a player, but he was also a defensive coach for the Cardinals, Dolphins, Bengals, Texans, and 49ers. He also served as the defensive coordinator for the Broncos and eventually was their head coach. Please welcome to the evaluation, Vance Joseph. And he sat down with our very own Mike Mayock.
Vance, welcome to the evaluation, man. Thank you.
This is awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Just recently, Sean Payton was at the Combine, and he came out and said, you know what? There are only 31 head coaching jobs out there, and there were 10 available this year. I don't know why Vance Joseph didn't get one of them. How frustrated are you getting about that whole process?
Any coach, any person that works hard, you just want it to be judged on just pure merit and, being the best, at your trade. If it's based on that, Mike, we can all live with the results because we chose this profession, and it's tough and it's a tough league. So I can't sit here and say I've been passed over. I don't feel that way. My thoughts go back to, how could I help my players and my kids get better, so next year we can go play for it, and go win it.
If you got another shot, how would you set the building up as far as the dynamic between the coaches and the scouts?
When these teams make these changes after 2 or 3 seasons, the group that loses the most is the scouting department, because they've been scouting for a certain system for 2 to 3 seasons. New coach comes in, new system comes in. Now these guys have wasted 3 years of work. You have to walk in and you have to be on the same page with your GM and your scouting department, and you have to present profiles for each position. If that's not clear early on in the process, you have no chance. Again, the player is our greatest resource, and we have to always get that right. The bond between the coaches and the scouts have to be really strong.
You have just triggered so many freaking thoughts in my head, Vance. It's unbelievable. You got your head job next year. The owner, when he's interviewing you, says, "Okay, Vance, look, who's got final say on roster?" And when you're being interviewed, what are you saying?
I would say to the owner, I don't care, because it won't work if myself and the GM, are not not locked in step. The coach has to have the freedom to build a roster to the system. And I think the GM has to understand that part. Like, we can't just take players that don't fit, because you can take very good players that have very different skill sets, and now you got a mismatched roster. It doesn't work. And I think something that also gets missed by young head coaches, that I probably missed as a young head coach, is winning through the building. Everyone who touched these players, man, positive, supportive. The guys who stacked the water coolers, man, they're invested. Hey, coach, man, nice blitz on 3rd and 10. The breakfast chef. Hey, coach, man, that 32 for the Patriots, he's a good player. I watched him last night. Let's take care of him. Everyone's invested. It's a building, that creates an environment and a culture of winning. And I've been in buildings where no one talked. Everyone was negative. In Denver, it's not that way. And that's why it's so exciting, to move forward with this football team and to see where we go. Feel that, right? You show up on the game day, man, I hope we win today. But I'm here to tell you, in the league, man, hope's not a strategy. Hope's an awful strategy in this league, You have to have a plan.
I can't tell you. I'm serious. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed listening to your philosophy on how to win in the NFL, how to be a head coach, how to work with the scouting community. I'm a big fan going forward that you become a head coach at a high level somewhere.
That means a lot.
Let me tell you something. It means a lot. You took your time to share with us today. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Mike.
Sam, this is obviously your area of expertise, but just can you talk big picture about AI and analytics and how it's changing the landscape of the game?
Whether it's Bill Belichick and Nick Saban breaking down actual tape with a cutter, or whether it's artificial intelligence that we've built in terms of LLMs, analytics and decision-making is a couple of things. It is making observations, documenting those observations, and trying to synthesize them to make decisions. AI, like SūmerBrain, for example, allows coaches and players to immediately get to the data and ask the questions that they want in the language that they want it. And I think that's key. Something I've had to learn as an analyst, Mike, is to speak up or to speak down the ladder, you have to be able to speak correctly. And I think things like LLM, SūmerBrain are very key in helping that. But I also think as technology progresses, we're going to be able to observe more, we're going to be able to document more, and that'll help us synthesize and make those decisions.
You're limiting yourself and your team if you don't open yourself to understanding more. And the more I learned about it, the more I was like, you know what, this can drive some things we do. And the coaches had already bought in fully because they can GPS it, they can do all kinds of things where their tape watching is done in 30 minutes by AI instead of 2 full days by 2 grad assistants in a back room. I had Sumer run an application for me. and I fed in some very technical football data. I'm telling you, 90 seconds later, it spits out this thing. And it would have taken 2 GAs 2 full days to get that data. There's all kinds of applications that run through my mind. So as opposed to old guys like me going, man, I'd like his get off. What we have is proof of the get off, and we have it because of AI. So I think anybody that doesn't try to utilize the tool to its fullest extent is not doing justice by their team.
Yeah, and I think that's the key there. You're talking about those 90 seconds versus those 2 days. There's a competition committee in the NFL. The NFL is designed to be competitive, and they're gonna iron out every single advantage that you could possibly get. There's one rule that is never gonna change in the NFL, and that is the games are gonna be played on Sunday, and you got a week to prepare. And I think the innovation and the addition that AI is going to make is not necessarily, disrupting and taking people out of jobs. What it's gonna do is keep you from sleeping on your floor and keep everybody locked in and focused on what actually matters rather than spending 2 hours and trying to separate the wheat from the chaff.
I'd like to thank our team at SūmerSports. Thank you, Vance Joseph, and thank you, Steve Mariucci. And on behalf of our team at SūmerSports, thank you at home for watching. And remember, draft night is loud, but evaluations are quiet. And we live in the quiet. Until next time.